Thinking about starting a saltwater or reef aquarium? Here are 10 must-have things you will need to get started. 1. Tank and stand. Today, I see these all-in-one systems that are tiny and wonder how anyone can keep anything alive in those things. These animals aren't betta fish, and even betta fish deserve more space than just a bowl. The manufacturers are just looking for a payday, and it's very easy to sell a cute all-in-one aquarium. If you're a beginner, I think you should avoid these because you will most likely fail. I know some of you disagree, and that's fine. It just doesn't make sense to me that since majority of the people getting these are new hobbyists. Start with at least a 40-gallon breeder or a 60-gallon cube. Anything smaller, you will get bored and just waste money because you'll end up upgrading. And the money you spend on your first system could have just gone to your second. I love the 120-gallon system, but you can't go wrong with a 75-gallon or a 90-gallon. Just try to pick a tank with good depth, as this will help with aquascape and flow. If you want to go bigger and have patience to wait, I suggest going custom. There are great companies out there such as Planet Aquarium, Reef Savvy, and Glass Cage. I went with Miracle Aquariums. I was able to add cool features like armor seams, external overflow box, and glass Eurobrace with custom hose for above the tank closed loop. Be sure to check out my closed loop video for more details. A lot of the off-the-shelf tanks today are rimless. A tank without top bracing, which is kind of crazy because you're putting so much strain on the silicone joints. When I spoke to my previous tank manufacturer about going rimless on my 115-gallon, they said they would only use 3/4 inch thick, as anything less would be risky given the amount of force the newer power heads such as Vortex and Gyros put on the seams. Going with the Eurobrace instead, the glass thickness was only a 1/2 inch thick. I do like the rimless look for shallower aquariums with a mangrove or a Planet aquariums, since you're not putting as much pressure on the glass. While the rimless looks nice at first, over time it can become an eyesore. You'll probably lose fish to jumping, and you'll end up adding a net cover, which looks awful. I know why they sell these rimless tanks. The amount of extra silicone and labor needed to put a bracing or a Eurobrace is pretty significant. It's like they're cutting 30% of their labor costs by selling these rimless tanks. Check out this video from Aquarium Service Tech. He found a seam about to give way and managed to remove everything just in time. Over the years, I have read a lot of horror stories like this, and it bothers me that the front panel could even be floating when Eurobrace tanks need a full foam bottom to evenly distribute the glass weight to prevent any imperfections on the glass from causing cracks. Also, a rimless tank is designed in a way that you don't have to have a canopy, and I tried that look on my 115-gallon and it looked great at first, but the light intensity was blinding and it even gave me a headache. Once I covered it with a canopy, the tank just looked better since there was no more light spills hitting my eyes and affecting the way I was looking at my corals. Also, if you're going to buy a used tank, make sure you trust the person and have a history of the tank. A few seasons of hot and cold cycles can weaken the silicone, so it's probably better to purchase a tank that is already wet. Think about it. Most people are not storing tanks in a heated house. They usually will be in the garage, shed, or basement. Another super important consideration is the stand. Most of the stands you find at the big box store are terrible. They're made of particle board and they are expected to hold 500 to 1,000 pounds plus of water without problems. I've purchased 3 particle board stands in my time and they all ended up damaged from water exposure. It's not that hard to build your own stand out of 2x4 or aluminum T-slot stand. These materials will give you a sturdy structure for your aquarium and you won't have to worry about spills compromising the stand's integrity. Don't skip these steps. It's super important to protect your investment with a solid, reliable support. 2. Learn about the species you plan to keep. Your mindset might initially focus on all the wrong things like tank size or anything else that catches your eye, and you'll become laser focused on those few things. This hobby is so much more enjoyable if you do your homework and not rely on all the staff at the local fish store. You should never put your animals in harm's way because of impulsive decision. Trust me, I've had my fair share of losses and I want to help you avoid these mistakes. Decide what species of fish and inverts you wish to keep. Create a list of must-have and build your aquarium around those inhabitants. Focus on keeping fish that are hardy in captivity with a proven track record of surviving 10+ years. For my current tank, I made a fish list long before starting my reef. It included 7 tangs, a pair of clownfish, a group of chromies. I told myself that once these fish were established, I wouldn't add any more. 2 years later, I still have not added any new fish. If I bought a new one, I'd have to go through quarantine, and honestly, the risk and effort aren't worth it. Besides, all my fish have established their territories and happy, and they are my first priority. I'm sure if they could speak, they would object to any new fish. There are exceptions to the rule. For example, all my peppermint shrimps mysteriously died, all 20 of them. Aptasia is starting to multiply aggressively, and these peppermint shrimps were doing a good job of eating all the baby Aptasias. So I'm considering adding a filefish or copper band. Early in my reef keeping journey, I put so much emphasis on buying larger fish. I hope this isn't still a case today, because now I much prefer adding smaller fish. They look better and tend to adjust to captivity more easily than large fish. I got my purple tang when it was 1 inch, and within a year it grew to 4 inches. My orange shoulder tang grew from 2 inches to 9 inches in 12 months. It doesn't take long for a fish to grow as long as you're making sure their bellies are full. Also, larger fish require much more maintenance and put a strain on your biological filter. It's better to stick with mostly smaller fish and a few larger show fish if you have the room for them. Instead, I would suggest looking for fish with good personalities like mandarins, hawkfish, and jawfish. Focus on creating a reef that resembles a natural reef with rock dwellers, swimmers, and cleanup crew inverts like bloodfire shrimp. 3. Filtration. Next up is filtration. You have 3 options: a sump, a hang on the back, or a canister filter. When you're starting out, I recommend keeping it simple. If you have the space under your stand, go for a sump. There are many benefits to a sump, but the number one reason is that your evaporation line will also be hidden from the tank. If you're using a hang on the back or canister filter, I can't imagine you'll be using an auto top-off systems. Years ago, I was that hobbyist, running a fluval canister filter and flooding my house every time I had to get it going again. Honestly, I can't see anyone using a canister filter today. It's basically a nitrate factory. With saltwater, you need good mechanical filtration, something that removes waste immediately from the water column. Storing waste in your canister or filter media for a long time isn't really removing it, it's just letting it sit there and rot, which can cause high nitrates and phosphate spikes, leading to algae issues. A sump gives you the flexibility. You can easily add things later, like an algae turf scrubber, UV sterilizer, refugium, marine pure blocks, just to name a few. To start your aquarium, you can keep it simple. Add a filter sock, filter pad, or a black sponge, which is what I use, or a fleece roller filter, and you're good to go. After the cycle, all you need is a protein skimmer. If your nitrates are high, do a 50% water change. You'll be fine. A lot of people use protein skimmers during the cycle, but it doesn't really make sense to me. You're trying to get your tank dirty for the cycle to complete. Removing everything too early will only slow down things. Wait until after you add your first fish to start running your skimmer. Doesn't really make sense. If there's no nutrients in the system, skimmer's not really going to perform well anyway. Now for chemical filter. Chemical filter is just a media that absorbs stuff from the water. I recommend ChemiPure Carbon. I tried to avoid it for years because of the cost, but it's the only carbon I've found that actually lasts for 3 to 4 months without leaching organics back into the water column. I've had first-hand experiences with other carbons that just don't cut it. Trust me, don't try to save a buck on carbon. You'll end up spending the same amount because you'll need to replace it every few weeks. ChemiPure is something I change out every 3 months, and even if I leave it for 4 months, I don't have to worry. I think they price it high because they know their product is that much better. So thank you, ChemiPure Carbon. You should sponsor this video and send me a lifetime supply of your product. Just kidding. There are other chemical filters on the market, such as GFO for removing phosphates, but let's not worry about that just yet. Set up your tank first, get it running for a few months, and then come back to it. Chances are you won't need it. A lot of people swear by it, but it's expensive, especially the good stuff like Rophos, which is what I would recommend. Now let's talk about biological filtration. Any surface in your aquarium will be used for nitrifying bacteria, which converts harmful ammonia and nitrites and then into less toxic nitrates. The more bacteria you have, the stronger your biological filter will be. Make sure you have plenty of rocks, sand, or biological media in your sump to hold these bacteria. You can't really have too much, but having too little is a problem. This part of the filtration is essentially free. As long as you're providing surface areas, the bacteria will grow on the sand, rock, and other surfaces in your tank. Before adding live rock, make sure your ammonia and nitrates are at 0. You could speed this up by adding nitrifying bacteria starter and testing regularly, or just dose the product and wait 2 weeks before adding your first fish. If you have access to another established tank, ask for a piece of live rock. It only takes about a pound or so to introduce highly active biological strains to your system. If your system doesn't have space for a sump, you might have to go with a hang on the back filter or all-in-one tank. The benefit here is that you don't need to do any fancy plumbing or have to do gymnastics to get into your stand. If you go this route, I highly suggest getting a hang on the back filter that includes a skimmer. Once you're comfortable with the basics and your fish are healthy, start testing for nitrates and phosphates. If they trend upwards and water changes aren't helping, consider investing in an algae turf scrubber or a refugium. If you have space in your sump, these can help manage excessive nutrients. But don't jump the gun yet. Get your tank going first and figure out what your system really needs. In the past, I overdid my nutrient export and ended up underdoing it in the new system. They say every tank is different, but they should really say that every tank's nutrient import and export is different. Treat your system as an independent entity and don't just copy what others are doing. You'll hear people with amazing tanks talk about them dosing vodka, vinegar, sugars, or using biopellets. You'll be tempted, but do nothing unless your tests show you need that. 4. Heater and controller. You'll need a heater and controller. Over the years, I've tried many different brands, but the one I've always recommended is a Eheim heater. I first used this 30 years ago, and in all my tanks in the hobby, I've never heard of one exploding. I did make the mistake of buying a cheaper Chinese heater for my quarantine tank once. One cracked when I took it out and placed it on the floor. Eheim heaters, on the other hand, are made of some kind of shatter-resistant glass, so they're well engineered. I think it's a good practice to replace heaters every 5 years, and maybe repurpose them and use them on a saltwater mixing vat until they eventually stop working. That said, I've had Eheim heaters running for 5+ years without a single issue. Equally important as a heater is a controller. Now, this isn't something you absolutely need on day one because every heater comes with its own controller, but those built-in controllers are more prone to failing on the on position, and you won't know there's a problem until it's too late. That's why I'm glad I discovered the Inkbird controller. It's a simple device that controls your heater, turns it on and off based on the temperature range you set. You can set it to be more precise, but that means your heater will switch on and off more frequently, leading to a shorter lifespan. Instead, I give it about 1.5 to 2 degree swing, so at the top of my display you'll see what the temperature of the Inkbird is set to, and below that you'll see the current tank temperature. Very easy to spot this every day when I walk down. Most hobbyists with controllers like Neptune's Apex or Hydros controllers use them to manage both heating and cooling through temperature sensors. I use a Hydros controller myself, but mainly just for monitoring my tank temperature. When it comes to controlling my heaters, I prefer the Inkbird controller. I like having my heater controller separately from my Hydros controller for redundancy. If my Hydros controller ever failed, I'm still covered. But plus, I love the digital readout from the Inkbird. I just have to do a walkthrough and glance at it, and I know exactly where the temperature is and where it's supposed to be. However, when I'm on vacation or away from home, I use the Hydros to check the temperature remotely. It's always between 77 to 78 degrees, so I know everything is running smoothly. Since the Inkbird is designed specifically to maintain temperature, I just trust it more to do its one job. My Wi-Fi goes down. I'm not sure how the Hydros would manage the heating properly, but the Inkbird doesn't rely on Wi-Fi, so I trust it will keep doing its job. If the temperature falls out of range, the alarm is loud enough for the entire house to hear. Over the years, that alarm has helped me catch issue or even one of the heaters failing. In addition to using a controller, I recommend using 2 smaller heaters instead of 1 larger one. In my 400-gallon tank, I use 2 300-watt Eheim heaters during the spring and summer months. In the winter, I add a third 300-watt heater because the temperatures can drop from 75 degrees. So from November through February, that extra heater really helps keep things stable. 5. Return pump. If you have a sump, you'll need a return pump. For a hang on the back filter, it usually comes with one built-in. Now, the important thing is to remember that return pump is a vital part of your system. Without it, the tank won't have filtration, making it the life support of your setup. Now, I'm not saying you need to spend $500 on an Ecotech Vector or $3,000 on a Biz pump, but do your homework. If you go with a lesser known brand, I took the chance with a Perea pond pump because someone I trusted preferred it over Ecotech Vector. There are people who swear by J-Bow return pumps. While I like J-Bow propeller pumps, I'm not sure I would trust them for the return pump, but to each their own. If you want a tried and true option, Eheim pumps are the most trusted and reliable out there. When choosing a return pump, make sure it's quiet and can handle the head pressure of your system. Head pressure is crucial because if your sump is 6 feet below your tank, a pump rated for 1,000 gallons per hour might only give you 500 gallons per hour. Be sure to check the head pressure rating so you're not getting half of what you expected. I learned this firsthand on my system, which was the first time I had a basement sump with a head pressure of 13 feet. My 6,000 gallons per hour pump only pushes about 1,500 gallons per hour to my display tank. So be sure to factor in head pressure. Pretty much every manufacturer has a graph on their box and it'll let you know how much gallons per hour is at 0 to like 10+ feet of head. If you can, go with a DC pump, which is controllable. This is ideal option because it lets you fine-tune the flow to match your nutrient demands of your system. I like having a controllable pump. It allows to crank up the flow during deep cleaning to flush out the system quickly. It's a nice feature to have. 6. Rock and sand. The first thing you'll probably do as a new hobbyist is make some impulsive decision. I've made every mistake imaginable, which is why I'm taking the time to make this comprehensive list so you don't have to. You'll still make some impulsive choices, that's part of the hobby, but try to avoid the common mistakes I'm going to be laying out here. One common mistake is heading to Petco and picking up the only crushed coral that they have, which is the Florida crushed coral. While this can work, there are so many different options for sand that it's worth taking the time to find out what best suits your tank. Florida crushed coral is sold in these stores mainly for fish-only systems. Decide what kind of species or fish you may be interested in if they have any sand requirements. For example, wrasses, they like to sleep in the sand, so a finer grain is preferable. The same goes for jawfish. They need a deep sand bed, and if you're not willing to provide that, it's better not to keep them. I recently ordered 100 pounds of Ocean Direct sand from Chewy and was happy with their selection and price. Premium Aquatic offers a great option called Tropic Eden Reef Flake. It's a perfect mix of medium and fine grain, and it won't get blown away by stronger water flows like other products might. In my current system, I decided to go bare bottom. I would have liked to add sand, but I knew I wouldn't maintain it properly, and it would just turn into a nitrate factory. Instead, I used white starboard on the bottom. Back in the day, I visited Worldwide Corals and they used white starboard as well. They have since switched to black, though I'm not sure why. I think the white gave a nice illusion of the sand and reflected light better, which helps with coral growth. Sure, it can look dirty at times, I don't mind much. What does bother me are the algae patches that can trap debris, but those are easy to siphon out using my Forever Siphon, which drains straight to the sump via a filter sock. Be sure to check out my water change video. For more on that, I'll leave a link in the description. As for rock, I suggest going with a mix of Marco rock, shelf rock, and real reef rock in Carib Sea shapes. This is your first tank. You might not have the patience to craft a stunning aquascape just yet. That's why I recommend getting at least 20 pounds of Carib Sea shape. This stuff is amazing. Every piece you get is usable and it already comes in cool shape, so you may not need to spend extra money on Marco cement and super glue. I spent over $150 on those for my aquascape, so keep that in mind when budgeting. That said, I definitely would pick up a few 2-part epoxies. I usually get Instant Ocean ones from Amazon. They're the best price and always available. With prices going up, I've learned to make it last longer and I use it more carefully. Just make sure to plan your aquascape dry outside of the tank using cardboard cutouts of the tank's base dimensions and reference the height too. 7. Lighting. When I converted my saltwater fish only system to a reef, I wanted the best lights out there, but couldn't afford it during high school or college. I purchased cheaper products and made adjustments to improve it. For example, I purchased metal halide Odyssey fixtures, upgraded the ballast to ice cap ballast, and added in name brand bulbs like Blue Plus, and it grew SPS corals really well. But it depends on what you're keeping and your budget. If you're planning on fish-only saltwater systems, I suggest getting the lowest PAR and wattage possible. Less light is less PAR, which means less fuel for algae and easier on your wallet. And today with Amazon, you could buy so many decent LED lights for cheap. Just make sure the reviews are good and you don't want to sacrifice burning your house down and save a few $100. Most lights in the hobby now are LEDs and controllable, allowing you to fine-tune the spectrum and light intensity to your liking. If you're planning to keep corals, you'll need a game plan for the type of corals you want. One thing I've learned in this hobby is that you rarely save money by buying cheaper products. However, you can make smart decisions by leaving yourself room to upgrade them. If you're unsure or don't want to upgrade later, a good option is the Aqua Illumination Blade Hybrid Fixture, Aquatic Life Hybrid Fixture, or even one of those Reef Bright Strip. These are hybrid fixtures so that you could start with the Reef Brights or T5s and leave yourself room in the future to add some expensive LED light fixtures. Whatever you choose, just make sure it will complement whatever you add later and last at least 5+ years. For example, with my 400-gallon setup, I have 3 Generation 5 Radion Pros and 4 60-inch T5 ATI Blue Plus bulbs. If I had a smaller budget, I would have added another 4 rows of T5, and that would have cost me about $600. I like my Ecotech Radiants for the controllability of the spectrum and overall performance is good. They give my tank a dawn to dusk effect with 3 hours of sunrise and 3 hours of sunset, which is hard to achieve with only T5s. Sure, I could add 5 more Radions to eliminate the need for T5s, but that's a big investment and comes with the hassle of wire management and large power supplies to hide. In the past, when I was using Radion Gen 4 lights, I encountered an issue with ReefLink, a router that controlled the lights and that malfunctioned one night, causing the lights to stay on all night. After that, I just trusted them a lot less and even went as far as putting a manual timer on the lights to ensure the power was cut for 10 hours every night. Sometimes too much technology can backfire, which is why I come to appreciate the simplicity of simple light that just turn on and off without needing constant rebooting. Every light fixture has its pros and cons. T5s provide a blanket of light that reaches every nook and cranny. I'm old school and I prefer a mix of T5s with either metal halides or LEDs. And for 30 plus years, reefers in the hobby have found the most success mixing two different light sources, so I still will recommend a combination is best, not only for its performance, but the simple fact that 100% of the corals I purchase are aquacultured and have grown in either LED, halids, or T5. So I feel having multiple light sources makes it easier for the corals to adjust to my system. Many new hobbyists will be sticker shocked when seeing the cost of these LED lights. Ecotech Radians are currently $1,000, which is crazy. If I didn't use T5s, I would have definitely needed at least 8 of these for a grand total of $8,000. But just do your homework and get something that fits your budget and need. 8. Refractometer. To measure the salt in your water, you'll need a refractometer. I recommend ordering one online since most pet stores rarely carry them. They're inexpensive and can last a lifetime because they have no moving parts. Just a simple area where you place some tank water, hold it up against the light, and get an accurate reading of the salt levels, known as specific gravity. You'll likely see a lot of hydrometers at the pet store. I bought at least 8 of them over the years and wish somebody had told me to get a refractometer from the start. Along with the refractometer, you'll need a calibration fluid, which is just a 35 ppt salt solution. It lasts a long time, is used to calibrate your refractometer before testing. I calibrate mine every 1 to 2 weeks or before a water change to ensure accuracy. Just make sure you never get the little calibration screw part wet. I made that mistake before and it rusted and I had to throw the refractometer out. So now I just clean the measuring prism and flap. 9. Automatic top off. An ATO system automatically replenishes freshwater as needed, saving you lots of manual work, ensuring stable salt levels and water chemistry. For my system, I use a 65-gallon freshwater drum. I drilled some holes and added a 1/2-inch bulkhead and silicone tubing to create a level indicator. That way I know when it's running low. I use a hydros controller with their ATO kit, but I've also had great experiences with the ice cap ATO. Many hobbyists swear by Tune's ATO. While I have never used it, this is definitely a solid option. When setting up an ATO, you'll need to account for space for the freshwater reservoir. If it won't fit in your stand, you can get creative and place a container next to the tank or even feed it through the wall into the closet or less visible area. As a beginner, I highly recommend using an ATO. It allows you to focus on the most important things like learning about animals you want to keep or simply relaxing and enjoying your aquarium and not constantly worrying about if your tank is running low on water. I used to manually top off the water as needed, not realizing how much the fluctuation affected the parameters like alkalinity and magnesium. Our aquariums are already dealing with external forces like living in a glass box, so having an ATO in place is vital for stable chemistry. If you're keeping a fish-only system, you might get away with this since fish aren't as sensitive, but in a reef tank, corals and invertebrates thrive on stability. Skipping an ATO could lead to failure, but as I just mentioned, you'd rather not worry about it, and this automation has so much redundancy that it's hard to mess up. Just don't try to hooking up directly to the RODI. After all, I wouldn't want you flooding your house. 10. RODI. If you're planning to keep aquatic life, you're going to need an RODI system. Tap water might seem clean, but it contains so much harmful toxic metals, nutrients, and even chloramines that can wreak havoc on your tank. Using treated tap water for your aquarium is like adding invisible junk into your system, and it's only a matter of time before the aquatic life starts suffering. The great thing about our RODI system is that it purifies your water to 100% purity, ensuring none of those harmful elements get into your tank. Trust me, after making just 100 gallons of water with mine, I was shocked at how dirty the sediment filter looked. It really makes you realize how much stuff is in regular tap water that we can't even see. Now, I get it. RODI systems can sound expensive and complicated, especially if you're new to the hobby. I remember as a kid flipping through the aquarium catalog, seeing these pricey, intimidating systems and thinking, no way, that's not for me. But the good news is, prices have dropped over the years and they've become way more affordable and user-friendly. For example, I found a 100-gallon per day unit from Filters Direct that was fully assembled and ready to go, with color coding tubing that made installation a breeze. I've installed over 10 of these units by now. My current system is custom built by me using various RODI systems over the years. Why? Because at one point, I was spending way too much money on replacement filters from California and the shipping cost was killing me. So I decided to test out some free filters from a company called Aquaboom. They offer great quality at a much better price, so I buy them in bulk now and change them out frequently. It's been a game changer. What used to cost me $10 per replacement is now much more affordable. A lot of companies will sell you units at a decent price, but they make their money by getting you to keep buying their replacement filters. That's why I'm no longer buying Cooler Max RODI systems, as their pre-filters don't fit the Aqua Boom replacement. Also, their DI resin cartridges just aren't sufficient for the reef tank. They get depleted way too quickly and you end up burning through more DI resins than necessary. That brings me to another point. DI resin is part of the RODI system that makes your water reach 0 TDS, which is what you want for your aquarium. I upgraded to the BRS dual DI resin chamber, which holds more resin and let me go at least 2 to 3 months before needing to change it out. With the dual chamber, you rotate the cartridges, ensuring that you're replacing them only when they're completely depleted. This way, you're not wasting half of your resin, because in a single cartridge system, the resin might stop producing 0 TDS halfway through. Using a TDS meter helps determine when your DI resin is depleted, so you don't change it out too soon. It's a small step, but it saves you money in the long run, and it's one of those things you get the hang of as you dive deeper into the hobby. Miscellaneous. Besides the 10 essentials I've already mentioned, there are a few more things that I came up with while I was doing this. Some of the things might be small, but trust me, they'll make your life a lot easier. First off, hit up your local dollar store and grab at least 4 1-gallon jugs for water storage. For water changes, depending on the size of your tank, I recommend these brew containers. But if you have a smaller aquarium, a few 5-gallon buckets might work. You'll also want to grab a fish net. This is super useful for moving fish, cleaning debris, and putting your fish in the tank, of course. And obviously fish food, make sure you're buying food suited to the type of fish you wish to keep. A pair of long tongues will help you with feeding and moving corals or rocks around. I also recommend some sturdy gloves for which you're handling anything inside the tank. You need a good propeller pump to keep water flowing, which is critical for the health of your tank. 2-part epoxy for fixes and float valves to prevent any overflow from the container. Also, getting a good surge protector is another must-have. I prefer the metal ones with individual switches for each outlet, so you can easily turn off equipment like skimmer and heaters during maintenance. Now, when it comes to testing your water, you'll need a reliable kit. For beginners, I suggest the API Saltwater Master Kit. It's a great entry-level test kit, but here's a tip. Use it for the cycle for the first few months, then toss it out and upgrade to a better test kit like Saltwater, Hana, or Red Sea for more accuracy as your tank matures. I say the API because it comes with ammonia and nitrite test kits, and after the tank is established, ammonia and nitrite will remain at 0 in most circumstances. Not saying it's not possible, but I have wasted lots of time testing ammonia and nitrites and never seen it rise after the cycle. Today, I tend to pay attention to calcium and alkalinity, phosphates, nitrates, specific gravity, pH, and temperature. The others don't fluctuate as much, and an ICP test every 6 months usually confirms this. Don't forget to subscribe. Peace out.